Welcome. This is Nothing But Fun Bible Talk, and I'm Emily Trotter. Thanks for being here. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for showing up at all. This is your first time. Welcome. If you're a regular, thank you so much. I wish that I could just give you a big hug. And some of you I have seen that you've told me, and I have hugged you, and so I appreciate that. I never would have considered myself a hugger. Until maybe after after COVID, right? And then it all things changed, right? Of course. So we're looking at what are women like? What is a woman supposed to be? And last week we talked about Eve and God made a woman. And really, I taught myself so much. I guess I shouldn't say I taught myself. I've got a little hair thing sticking up. I apologize. This is what happens when you sleep with your hair wet and you have curly hair like I do. But I shouldn't say that I taught myself. I should say that the Holy Spirit taught me, right? So the Holy Spirit taught me so much in that and how special the creation of Eve was. I mean, of course, everything God creates is special, right? It all is planned. In Psalm 139, which if you've known me at all or listened to any of these, I have quoted this scripture a lot because it's something that my mother said to me over and over again growing up. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You were knit together, or I knit you together in your mother's womb. So we were planned, and God, everything's great, but how special Eve's beginning was, right? It just really struck me now when I sat down and looked at all of it. So anyway, we're moving on before I get too distracted about how great Eve was. But we're going to talk about, it's going to take a little different track here. So listen, my whole point in doing this is I think that there is such there's so much confusion around what women are and what we should be and what our point is and what our purpose is and all this, that, and the other, from many different places, right? And so I immediately, when I was thinking about doing this series, I immediately thought, well, who are some women in the Bible that, who do I want to talk about? Who do I want to showcase? Who needs to be brought to light? And I came up with this list that, I really feel like that the Lord directed me to, because it took me a long time to decide what we were going to study, starting out season 2 of Nothing But Fine Bible Talk. And so Deborah, this next one we're going to talk about is Deborah. And I was like, and I'm just going to go in order of the Old Testament, right? Well, so Deborah, when I started looking at this, it's not exactly a great, not that she wasn't great, she was fantastic, but what she did and the reason that she did it is a little, it's not exactly ideal for us women. However, God used her. And I think that's what we have to remember. So some of these women that I talk about may not be, obvious choices. Although now out of context, Deborah would be. But when you start looking into the context of who she was and why she was, it gets a little bit murkier and harder to see. So, Emily, why don't you just teach us out of context? Well, because that's not what I'm about. I'm all about what does the word say and what does it mean in context of what it was written, okay? And I think that you have to, especially in the Old Testament, you've really got to understand what was going on at the time. And you really have to understand the cultural things. Sometimes you have to understand the cultural things and why the point is brought up, right? So we're going to talk about Deborah, and her story is in Judges, in chapters 4 and 5. And so Judges is a book. It's right after Joshua. And who is Joshua? Well, Joshua took over for Moses, okay? So when, they've come into the promised land, Joshua's led them in. This is just right at the beginning after they've been gotten their inheritance, the 12 tribes. And so they've kind of spread out here in the promised land, which was in the land of Canaan. So, right? So here we go. So these are the judges because well, we're just going to have to go to chapter 2 of Judges. That's what we're going to have to do. Okay, so we're going to the chapter 2 of Judges. And I just want to read a little bit to you. So, the angel of the Lord at Bochum. So, this is chapter 2. And the other thing that we have to realize about the book of Judges is it's not chronological. The other thing that I learned is that, and we want it to be chronological and we want it to be all encompassing. You know what I mean? We want to know that this is exactly how it happened and this is the order. And we got to get over that. We just have to get over it. And I should have gotten my chronological Bible out and looked all of this out first, but I forgot until just this moment. So maybe if I need to correct some things, I'll go back and do that. But we can't look at it that way, and it's not going to line up the way that it doesn't have all the answers spelled out. Sometimes you've got to look for this stuff. So Judges is not chronological. The other thing is that these judges, there were 12 in total. And the book of Judges talks about 6 of them, and 3 of them in more detail than the others, okay? So the other thing is these judges weren't necessarily over all of Israel. They were more, I read something that said that they were kind of chieftains, or if it was, where does it say? They were the, here it says, the judges whose stories were, this is actually what Wikipedia says, and so I'm not squinting. Let me just put on some glasses. The judges were, and I don't always trust Wikipedia, but this one I thought was pretty good. The judges whose stories are recorded in the Old Testament were individuals who served as military leaders of the tribes of Israel in times of crisis in the period before the monarchy was established. Okay, so Israel did not have a king. They were not ruled collectively like that. They were supposed to be, who's supposed to be their king? God was supposed to be their king. That's where they were supposed to be getting all of their leadership from and their direction from, okay? God speaking through people, okay? And so they were more regional, political, military, kind of like a tribal chieftain, okay? That's who the judges were. And why did they have the judges? Well, I'll get back to that. Now we're getting back into that because that's why I started talking, okay? So they've come in to the promised land. This is immediately after Joshua has passed away. And what you're going to see in Judges is this gradual decline. This is a moral decline. And they just get farther and farther and farther away from what God told them. And remember, they had promised to be obedient to what he asked them to do. They had made a covenant with him, and he was going to be with them, and they were going to do all the things that he commanded them to do, right? And they said, absolutely. And what happens is when you get further and further in moral decline, what happens is that you start not upholding your end of the bargain, right? So, in chapter 2 of Judges, it says, the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochum and said, I brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land that I swore to give to your forefathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And you shall not make a covenant with the people of this land, but you shall break down their altars. Yet you have disobeyed me. Why have you done this? Now, therefore, I tell you that I will not drive them out before you. They will be thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a snare to you. And when the angel of the Lord spoke to them, the Israelites, they wept aloud. So here you see what's happened. They went into the promised land. He told them to drive all the people out, and they didn't. For whatever reason. We're not going to, I could talk about that for, hours. It's so fascinating to me. But It didn't happen that way. And the reason that God wanted them to do that is because he knew that they were going to be, he says that these gods that they have are going to be a snare to you. You're going to get tripped up by this, right? So now skipping over to still chapter 7, but verses 16 through 23, it says, "Then the Lord raised up judges." Okay, so here's why we have judges who saved them not who saved them out of the hands of those raiders, yet they would not listen to their judges, but prostituted themselves to other gods and worshiped them. Unlike their fathers, they quickly turned from the way in which their fathers had walked, the way of obedience to the Lord's commands. So, see, they're slipping. Whenever the Lord raised a judge for them, he was with the judge and saved them out of the hands of their enemies as long as the judge lived. So he was with the judge. The judges that he called, he was with them. Okay. For the Lord had compassion on them as they groaned under those who oppressed and afflicted them. But when the judge died, the people returned to ways even more corrupt than those of their fathers, following other gods and serving and worshiping them. They refused to give up their evil practices and stubborn ways. And therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel and said, "Because this nation has violated the covenant that I laid down for their forefathers and has not listened to me, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations Joshua left when he died. I will use them to test Israel and see whether they will keep the way of the Lord and walk in it as their forefathers did." The Lord had allowed those nations to remain. He did not drive them out at once by giving them into the hands of Joshua. So he set this, some of this was them being disobedient, some of them was God wanting to test them. And the other thing was they had no legacy. What God had done for these folks, for Israel, had been just forgotten by this point because it has been several generations. Now, if I go back to Joshua, when he passed away, we're going back into now to the verses of chapter 2 that I've skipped. It says that Joshua, when he died, and the whole generation that had been gathered to their fathers, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals, Baals. For right now, I can't say that word. They forsook the Lord and God their father. So in Deuteronomy, way back when they're supposed to be. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to leave this legacy, which means you're going to tell, here's what God did for us. Here's why we serve him. Here's why he's great. Here's why he deserves our love and our loyalty. Here's why we should do what he commands. This is where he's brought us. You have to share your legacy, or look what happens within a generation or two. It's nowhere to be seen. It's gone. And that's what's happened with the Israelites. I mean, and we can still see this, honestly, we can still see this happening with the Israelites. A little bit, okay, we can't talk about that. we can't talk about that because I don't know that I know enough. I'm still learning all of this, okay? But the Judges, and kind of a repeating phrase that happens in Judges is the Israelites did what they wanted. They did what was right in their own eyes. They became more and more evil. Why? Because they had all these different things all these outside things. A note in my Bible that I thought was so good that I marked. This is my my NIV, the Life Application Study Bible, had this great note. It says, by accepting these gods into their homes, the Israelites gradually began to accept the immoral practices associated with them. Most Israelites didn't start out determined to be idolaters. They just added the idols to the worship of God, but before long they found themselves absorbed in pagan worship. So it started, innocent enough, right? Sort of. You just, I don't know. Maybe I'm just goofy because here's the thing for me. When I You see all these little decorative items out. I mean, Target, TJ Maxx, Home Goods, wherever it might be. I mean, and, fancy schmancy ones. You see all these decorative items that, like the little fat Buddha who looks so happy and serene. You see him, and you see all these other little, like the Hindu gods. You see a lot of these other things, and it just looks like decoration to you. But is it? And it's innocent because you look at it and you think, okay, look, this is a really cool piece of art, or this is neat. I really like the way that this looks. And man, that would look really good on my shelf. Look, this Buddha would be an excellent bookend. This little gold statue here. I'm just going to grab it, not thinking anything of it, and put it in your house. I'm not saying that you're going to start worshiping it, but and maybe it's just me, I get a little check in my spirit saying, you can't bring that in. Nope, nope, nope. No, no, no. Because what starts out as something innocent, like, ooh, this would be great little tchotchke from a shelf, opens the door to maybe something else. That's what God's saying. That's what he had told them. He was like, you're not gonna understand. You're gonna think, hey, no big deal. That's why I was like, don't intermarry with these people, because their customs, you're just gonna end up rolling into their customs, and that's not who you are, and that's not what you're about, and that's not what I've called you to do. That's not what I want. You are supposed to be loyal and devoted to me, because I've proven that I am loyal and devoted to you. Because I have done all these things for you. I have brought you this far. Don't abandon me now. And then the time of the judges, that's exactly what was happening. Okay? So all these other ites, that they're called the ites because they all end in ite, right? All these other ites were constantly coming against. And as it said, when God would raise up a judge, and during that time, God would use the judge and would help them out. Okay? So this becomes a vicious cycle, this period of time for the Israelites, because they enter into this spot where they're sinning, they're worshiping other gods, they're the idolatry and the immorality that's going on. Then they cry out, then God raises up a judge, then they conquer and they get back on track and they're doing well, and then the judge dies, and guess what happens? They go back to sinning, worshiping idols, immoral living. They cry out. You see, it's that vicious cycle. That's what's happening during this time. And it was before they had a king, because at the end of the time of the judges, and I think we've talked about Samuel before on Bible Talk, I correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Samuel was the last judge, okay? And he was a priest, and he is the one that God used to call Saul, because that is when the people of Israel were like, we want a king. We want a king. So this is the time before King Saul and then King David. This is the time before the kings of Israel were a thing, okay? This is the thing. So Deborah happens in chapter 4 and chapter 5, okay? And she was the third judge of the judges. That's how she's described in Judges, okay? And there were 40 years of peace with her. And she was a prophetess, which means she shared things that were coming, right? So the Lord spoke through her. So clearly they had a relationship, okay? The Lord knew her. She knew the Lord. And she would sit under the Palm of Deborah. It even was named after her because that's where she always was. and she would sit there, and people would come to her with their disagreements, with their problems, with, and asking her for her advice. Okay, and she was judging. She was serving as that judge in that time, in that way. Okay, so she was sitting there and doing that. I read a really interesting article talking about, because they're date palms. Okay, and talking about what that signified in the Hebrew culture, and it signified unity. And you're in a desert and you've got this palm, and the palm will give shade. There will be shade under it. So it's a place of rest. It's a place where you go to get it's unity. That's why people went there. That the shade and the just being able to get away, and it had the dates, which was the sweetness and the goodness. Okay, so interesting fact that I read. But that's where Deborah sat. Okay. It says that she was the wife of Lappidoth. Well, I tried to look him up. No one knows who he is. Here's the thing. There are three schools of thought here: that she was actually the wife of this man named Lappidoth, or she was from somewhere named Lappidoth, or she was actually a flame keeper, lighter in the sanctuary, because Lappidoth has a root in flame, light, lightning in the Hebrew language. So it could be any of those things. We don't know. They also say that this Lappidoth might have also been Barak, who is in this story with her, who is the general of the military. Okay? Lots of different things here. But this is what we know. That's what they tell us about her. So what's happening is this Barak, her general, comes and says, hey, we've got these people. God, these guys are being terrible. They've got all these chariots and they're coming to get us. And I saw this. I'd never even thought of it this way, but a chariot in that time was like a tank. Okay, that would be like somebody rolling up with a tank. So when they've got all these chariots coming, let me get over to chapter 4. So all these chariots are coming, and they're afraid because they're like, they're going to roll right over us. We're just guys standing here, right? So they were the Lord into the hands of. Okay, so after Ehud, that was the judge before, the Israelites once again did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Notice that it says once again. We've been here before. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, a king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera. He lived in because he had 900 iron chariots and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. They cried to the Lord for help. He had been cruelly oppressing them for 20 years, and he had 900 chariots. That's a lot. That's a lot. So he had these chariots, and Deborah is sitting there, and she sits between Ramah and Bethel, which is that's going to be north of Jerusalem, okay? Somewhere in between there, in the hill country of Ephraim. Ephraim was one of the tribes, okay? She herself was from the tribe of Naphtali. But they came to her to have their disputes decided, and then she sent for Barak, and said to him, the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead the way to Mount Tabor. I will lure Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands. And Barak said to her, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. Very well, Deborah said, I will go with you. But because of the way you are going about this, the honor will not be yours. For the Lord will hand Sisera over to a woman. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. Blah, 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 blah. All that happened, and they won. Okay? They win. Here's the thing that's a little bit of humiliation with the Israelites here. It would have been humiliating to be led into battle by a woman. And it probably didn't strike fear into the hearts of this other army. They're like, hi, we've got 900 iron chariots. You've got a woman leading you with a couple thousand men. Seriously? We've got 900. We can run over all of you. And they won. So, humiliating, being led by a woman. No, we don't like that. I mean, it's not ideal for our story that we're going for here. That, right? It's not we don't want to. We don't want to think about that. We don't want that part to be part of it. We only want the Lord to use us in mighty, mighty ways, and for it to be obvious that we were the best choice for obvious reasons, and that no one could do it like we could, and we're special. That's how we want it to be viewed. Ideally, that's it, but it's not what happened. She was a woman. She was respected in her little spot. They came to her. She must have been kind. She must have been fair. She's a good leader. People listened to her. I mean, she had earned some respect amongst her neighbors, I guess. They came to her. But she wasn't who they expected, I guess. And isn't that good? Deborah wasn't who the enemy expected. Woo! Write that down. Except put your name in. Emily is not who the enemy expected. But Emily was victorious. You see? Or not, you may not be who is expected to come. You're still, mind you, going into battle against someone who's better prepared than you, got the tools they need. It's going to hurt. It's going to be rough. But you weren't who they expected. But you are the one who's going to come out on top. Why is that? Because God is with you if you allow him to be. If you stay in contact with him. If you have that intimate relationship with him. Look what you can achieve. A little bit humiliating to be led into battle by a woman for the Israelites. We still have time. We still kind of have an issue with that now, right? I mean, right? I mean, I know that there are female generals, right? But that's only been in my lifetime that's been allowed. And they're still not, I mean, they're still the minority there. A woman? Shh. They don't think like that. They're not logical like we are. Getting everybody all stirred up. I think it's better to not be the one expected. I like the element of surprise. What is that? Walk softly and carry a big stick? Yeah. Never see us coming. Be the unexpected leader. Be the unexpected victor. Jesus loves you.